Ted Cruz and Bill Cassidy file resolution to designate Antifa as a domestic terror organization, a terrorist organization. Now, this is really complicated and very difficult to do. And I gotta say, I understand the sentiment. The DHS and the FBI, according to The Independent, have already labeled them as such, or at least their actions. And the challenging thing here is, if they do label Antifa a terror organization, all Antifa has to do is stop using that logo and call themselves something else. So how you really solve the problem, I don't know. We're just facing an increasingly violent and polarized country. But I will say, one of the things actually fueling the extremism is the media. Because when something crazy happens with fringe, far-right, whatever you want to call them, people, everyone condemns it. When something happens with the left, they say, oh, it's nothing, or they say a man. Like a lot of the stories talking about the ICE guy, the guy who came with the firebombs, they said a man was shot and killed, a man. How about a fringe far-left extremist was firebombing vehicles, and might I add, if he succeeded in firebombing the facility, would have killed a bunch of migrants, but that doesn't make the news. It doesn't. One of the things I find very fascinating about this whole debate is, you know, you get people like Shaun King with 1 million followers. So I do want to read this story, but let me just say one thing. Alex Jones. They say he's the purveyor of fake news and he calls for violence, so they ban him. Okay, fine. Sure. I hear your arguments. I disagree with banning people based on, their opinions. They claim that he was inciting people. And yes, there have been some metaphorical calls that even Jones recently has stopped himself from saying, because he used to do this very hyperbolic thing where he'd say like, I'm going to do, and then he stops. And that's a more recent thing. So perhaps, but look, I got to admit, I don't watch Alex Jones. I don't. I know it's controversial, but whether or not I watch Alex Jones is besides the point. Here you have a man, Jones, they accuse of making fake news and calling people to violence. Okay, so they banned him. Sure. Then you have Shaun King. He falsely accused a cop of impropriety of raping a woman. He's falsely accused the Proud Boys of going to some bar in some like ridiculously annoying video he made on YouTube where he's like, like laying down in his bed. And it was just so cringy, and it was a totally fake story. So Shaun King is different from Jones for sure, but he does put out fake news, and he praised a terrorist, and he still has a post calling for terrorism. Is he banned? No, I ask you, where are the standards? Okay, we'll come back to this. Let me read the news. I don't want to bury the lead. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you want to support my work. There's a PayPal option, a crypto option, a physical address. But of course, the best thing you can do, just share this video because YouTube has deranked independent commentary. So I rely on you. If you think people should hear what I have to say, then share it. Otherwise, just don't, and we'll go to the news. The Washington Examiner writes Republican Senators Bill Cassidy and Ted Cruz filed a resolution on Thursday to categorize Antifa, a militant left-wing group known to assault political opponents and journalists, as a domestic terrorist organization. Quote, Antifa is a terrorist organization composed of hateful, intolerant radicals who pursue their extreme agenda through aggressive violence. Time and time again, their actions have demonstrated that their central purpose is to inflict harm on those who oppose their views, Cruz tweeted. Like any terrorist organization, they choose to pursue their political ends through violence, fear, and intimidation. They must be stopped. I'm proud to introduce this resolution with Senator Bill Cassidy to properly identify what Antifa are, domestic terrorists. They go on to say, another quote I believe from Cassidy, Antifa are terrorists, violent masked bullies who fight fascism with actual fascism, protected by liberal privilege, Bill Cassidy tweeted 2 weeks before filing the resolution. Bullies get their way until someone says no. Elected officials must have courage, not cowardice, to prevent terror. The resolution says the group diametrically opposes First Amendment values of peaceful assembly and free speech. It also cites the physical assault of journalist Andy Ngo in Portland in late June, and the threats Antifa members have issued towards employees of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. The document ends by calling on the federal government to deploy all available and appropriate tools to combat the spread and growth of domestic terrorism in the U.S., grouping Antifa with white supremacist terrorism. So the bill actually condemns white supremacy too. I think that was absolutely correct of them to do, spot on, because we're not playing a game of he said, she said, who, what, where, left, right, whatever. The point is, if one thing is bad and something else is bad, let's nip in the bud. We're done. We know it. It's bad. If fringe wackaloon, left-wingers are going to do something, it's bad. If fringe wackaloon right-wingers are going to do something, it's bad. Extremism is bad. I am not saying they're equivalent. And that's the silly and ridiculous game we end up seeing. Because here's the story from the Washington Free Beacon. It's from a couple days ago. I've talked about it already. Shaun King, I made a video about this, okay? He's got a tweet pinned on his Twitter where he says it's time to take action to liberate these camps by any means necessary. That's an overt call for violence. I'm not kidding. In the article he posts, he says something like, people ask me if I'm saying we should be violent. I'm just saying, aren't we supposed to liberate them? What do you think he's trying to say? He's dancing around the rhetoric. So fine. Is it a legal issue? Maybe not. Maybe he should be allowed to say this. But why would Twitter allow this? It's far more egregious than anything Alex Jones has ever done. Now oh man, boy, do I love the response I get when I bring this up. Invariably, I get people on Twitter saying, I don't know, Tim, what's the death count for left-wing violence? And I'm like, are you seriously arguing that your defense of the terrorist in Washington is that we haven't killed that many people? Like, have you lost your mind? Listen, it's so insane for me to be like, I view myself as like a regular American moderate. You know, the biggest voting bloc is moderate. Granted, you have strong liberals, passive liberals, moderate, passive conservative, strong conservative. And together, the liberal and conservative side are bigger, around like 34, 35% each. And then you have like 27%, which is moderate. But the biggest individual group, because like the passionate liberals and the passionate liberals and the passionate conservatives are outnumbered by moderates. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, I talk to regular people every day. Nobody likes violence. So I'll tell you this. When some crazy dude gets a gun and goes into a church or a mosque or a synagogue, of course that's psychotic and insane. And that's what we need law enforcement for and intelligence agencies to stop these people before they do it. Great, good. Thank you, law enforcement. Please stop it. And they have. They've prevented many attacks and things like this, and they're not always successful. But then you get the left simultaneously decrying law enforcement because we do have accountability problems in some law enforcement agencies. We do have spying problems, sure. But can we differentiate the problems from what the job is supposed to be? I can absolutely criticize, the FBI, the NSA, the CIA, local law enforcement when they do bad things and those things get called out, and then praise them when they stop the evil Nazi bad men. Like, please do your job. We need that job done. So what happens then? When you talk about something like Shaun King, they say, what's the death count for the left? And my response is like, just because Antifa isn't killing people doesn't mean they're not bad. And why can't people separate themselves from like, look, listen, violence is violence. I don't care who's perpetrating it, and I don't care how extreme they get. If they're extreme and they're attacking people unprovoked, stop them. It's not an equivalence. We can certainly point to some ideologies and say, these are terrifying and evil ideologies. We can point to others and say, these are misdirected and ill-informed ideologies. But in the end, what is the result? Low grade. Here's the way I describe it. Antifa is like a blunt object. They go around beating people, but they're not like finishing people off. But there's a lot of it. We see a ton of people getting attacked in the streets. Over 800 incidents in the past year, or a couple of years, I'm sorry, of like harassment. Somebody wants to put on a rally where they wave American flags, they get berated in the media, they get insulted, accused of all the worst things in the book. I, as someone who believes in left-leaning policy, criticize the far left, and they call me right-wing. You can see how the game is played. So outside of criticism, you have Antifa going around bashing people over the head. Okay, you've got them now escalating to bring a rifle to a federal facility, beating the crap out of Andy No. So no, they're not killing people, but they're damn close. And that's bad. And then you look over at the crazy fringe right-wingers, and they are killing people. And that's really bad. And so yes, all of it is bad. Congratulations, you figured it out. One doesn't excuse the other in no way. And you know what I always see? Whenever something crazy happens, conservatives without a doubt denounce it. Call it out and say no. Shaun King. And this is what's the most frustrating thing to me. Trying to explain this to people on the left who are actually willing to engage in a debate. And I'm like, listen, man, the Covington kid standing on a staircase becomes a viral hit for every left-wing activist, for every major media outlet. And the dude who literally shows up with fire bombs and torches a car and nearly burns down a facility full of migrants, nowhere to be seen. So yeah, there's a media bias. Look, we've seen the charts, we've seen the data, we heard it from Jack Dorsey himself. Left-wing journalists all follow each other and they don't realize they're oblivious. They are completely oblivious. BuzzFeed wrote an article about Andy Ngo, and I laugh. It's like, my favorite analogy is a fire truck on fire. Like, they don't realize they're describing themselves in the story. Now, the story BuzzFeed did about Andy Ngo, it's not bad, okay? They talk about how it's not, the violence doesn't come from a vacuum, like Andy has been covering this for a long time, but they go on to say that it's like culture war, battle for attention, and all this stuff, and I'm like, BuzzFeed, do you not have a mirror in your building? Can you not look in the mirror and see yourselves? You're literally doing the same thing, pot, meet, kettle. The story that, from the same author, Joe Bernstein, I believe his name is, about Soph, the 14-year-old on YouTube, and he says, YouTube has only themselves to blame. Congratulations, you're piling on to clickbait outrage. Now, don't get me wrong, I do think BuzzFeed News is better than a lot of outlets. And case in point, they published a story on Carpe Donktum, the meme smith that Trump loves, and they didn't reveal his name. Good for you. There's no reason. I don't see what the point of the story is to reveal his name. They can absolutely talk about the issues without publishing someone's name. And minimizing harm is important. I will say, there even is newsworthy grounds to have published Carpe Donktum's name, to show the context of who he is and why he's a Trump supporter and why he makes memes. And they chose not to do it because they wanted to minimize harm. Absolutely respect that. Good job, BuzzFeed. Of course, the Daily Beast finds some dude who posted a video one time and doxes him. So BuzzFeed gets credit where credit is due, but please stop being oblivious. You're a part of this game as much as anyone else. And here's how I always differentiate between like what I do and what they do. First of all, I am deserving of no excuses. I completely understand. I make videos talking about things that I care about and I express my opinions, and this absolutely does fuel conflict in the culture war. And I honestly don't know what to do about it. I don't, because, the way I view myself is probably the way everyone else does. I fully recognize that. I talk about what I care about. I try and call out the BS. I say, look, left and right are not equal, but they're both bad in terms of extremism. We can call that out, right? So I think I'm doing the right thing. They, of course, think they do too. But here's the difference. When it comes to an organization like BuzzFeed, they have formulas for what gets traffic and what works. They have a bottom line. They have a boss saying we need articles that generate traffic to make money. I don't. I can make a video yesterday criticizing Trump over the send him back, and it doesn't do that well because I talk about what I care about. And typically what you see me tweeting is what I make videos about. As an individual, I talk about my opinions, and that's normal. As an organization, these big media companies are chasing bucks to fund, to back up their bottom line, and we've seen the exposés. It was something about Mike.com, I believe, where they had a formula. X person does Y, X happens, or something like that, where they told people, like, here's how you make rage bait. So BuzzFeed, as an organization, has to generate money. They have to make sure they're saying certain things, and so they go after certain people because they are very much a part of the culture war, if not one of the primary belligerents in it. To then make a story about Andy Ngo as if he's doing this to, as part of an attention economy thing, as though it's unique to him, is so hilarious. But anyway, this video is a little bit long. The ultimate point I want to make. Here's the news, because I always try to open videos with here's important news, and then let's talk about some issues. I don't think you can stop Antifa. I really don't. They'll just call themselves Fa-Anti. You know what I mean? Oh, it's a different organization. So what do? Do you make a nebulous catch-all, anybody who dresses up in all black? And no, you can't do that. You can't. The goal and tactics of Antifa are explicitly to exploit the law to get away with committing crimes. That's literally it. Like in DC, they all wear black on purpose so that when someone commits a crime, you can't charge everybody. They're taking advantage of liberal democratic institutions. No, I don't mean liberal as in left. I think this needs to be clarified for a lot of people who don't understand. Liberal democracy just refers to freedom base. Okay, you can be a liberal on the right in the academic sense, like classical liberal, John Locke, etc., center-right position, freedom, liberty, libertarian. Liberal democracy just refers to the fact that we respect individuals, we have democratic institutions. Unfortunately, the left for the longest time has co-opted the term liberal, so now people don't seem to understand. Liberal is a great thing. It means you lean towards freedom. Now, libertarians lean really towards freedom, but liberal is like, you're on the libertarian spectrum, you believe in more freedom for the individual, but you recognize there does need to be some governmental institutions, and that's why there's center-left liberal and there's center-right liberal. But anyway, I don't want to get into a whole argument about liberal. The point is, Antifa You can call them whatever you want, okay? And you're not going to be able to do anything about it. So I will say I'm glad that we're now seeing people try and take action against them because, yes, white supremacist terror is extremely bad and we should do everything we can to prevent it and to stop it. And I would dare say, I shouldn't even have to dare say, we absolutely need to allocate more funding towards stopping these fringe loner weirdos who go out with guns and shoot people. But in the end, I don't care what their ideology is. I care if they're violent. Antifa is low tier but widespread. The fringe wackaloon rights are few and far between but extremely lethal. Both are bad. They're not equal, but both are bad. Can we please agree on that? No, because the media ignores it, and then you get someone like Shaun King who can praise it all day and night. He's fine. He's still on Twitter. His article calling for terror, still on Twitter. Great. This is the world we live in. And final thought. When I point out, hey guys, terrorism is bad and we should prevent violence, they say, what's the death count of the left, Tim? Like, dude, are you seriously going to argue that because the left hasn't killed enough people, we shouldn't do anything about it? No, we should stop the violence before it gets bad, period. That's not going to happen, though, because a smirk warrants a beating, apparently. Like Reza Aslan tweeted something about wanting to punch a kid in the face because he was standing on the stairs. But where's anybody else complaining about a dude throwing firebombs at a facility? Yeah, nowhere to be seen. Yeah, well, welcome to America. This is how the world works. This is how our country works, I guess. But so long as there are people like, surprisingly, Ted Cruz and Bill Cassidy, and other people like me and those who are willing to call out the violence, we're not completely lost. But the moment when we lose all pushback for the extremists is when bad things happen. Because if we don't push back on Antifa on the far left, they will keep encroaching. And you see what happens. You see how we get to the escalation. The point we're at now is rather terrifying, where a guy shows up to an ICE facility with firebombs, and Shaun King's praising it, and no one's doing anything about it. We need to push back on this and say, you have crossed the line and you are outside the Overton window. You're a lunatic. Otherwise, other people will be emboldened and it will get worse. Unfortunately, I think it will get worse. But I'll leave it there. Stick around. Next segment coming up at 4 p.m. YouTube.com/TimCast. That's the main channel for those in the podcast. Obviously, the order is inverted, but stick around and I will see you all in the next segment.